What you are going to hear today is so powerful, so transformative, so amazing that I am pledging to you that it will change your life. This is a very important idea. It's a very interesting idea. It's a transformative idea, and it might be slightly distressing because what you're going to hear today is real and very powerful. It's not just theoretical. Let's begin. We recently read the story of Bilaam. Bilaam is a sorcerer / prophet, and he was hired to come curse the Israelites. And there's a whole parsha basically detailing his plot, his scheme. And they went to one mountaintop, and he was forced to bless the Israelites. He went to the second mountaintop. He was forced to bless them a second time, a third time. He gave them 4 blessings, and he went home in ignominy. Bilaam had a superpower that enabled him to curse. And the Talmud tells us that he had a very specific ability that enabled him to curse with such destructive impact. Very interesting. The Talmud tells us that there is a brief moment of daily divine wrath. There's one moment every day where there's a brief, fleeting instant of divine wrath. Now, one day we're going to have a whole podcast on why there is a daily moment of divine wrath. But there is a daily moment of divine wrath. Now, most of us are not even aware of this concept, and certainly we don't know when that moment is. But Bilaam's superpower was the ability to identify, to pinpoint the exact moment of the daily divine wrath. And he would use that moment to channel a curse. And when a curse is levied at exactly the moment of divine wrath, it lands with devastating impact. And the Talmud tells us that for the duration of Bilaam's attempt at cursing the nation, God temporarily suspended this daily moment of divine wrath. So Bilaam's there, all dressed up, ready to curse, ready to destroy, waiting for that moment, and the moment doesn't come. And the Talmud tells us that had God maintained the typical schedule of a moment, a daily moment of divine wrath, Bilaam would have identified that moment and would have used it to blast the nation with a curse, and the nation would have been completely destroyed. There would have been nothing left over. But God did a tremendous kindness to our nation, and he suspended the practice of a daily moment of divine wrath. And that's why when Bilaam gives the first blessing, the first thing he says, I want to curse, but how can I curse when God doesn't want to curse? Meaning, the only way I can curse is if I have the divine boost of the divine moment of divine wrath. And because God did not have that moment for the duration of Bilaam's attempt at cursing the nation, therefore, he was unable to curse. The Talmud concludes, how long does this divine moment last? Rega. Rega means like an instant. This is what the Talmud tells us. There's a moment, a fleeting moment every day when God has wrath. And that's the best time, the most propitious time to land a curse. And Bilaam's superpower, he was able to identify, to isolate, to pinpoint that precise moment. and he would use that moment to curse. If you yourself want to identify that moment, to get rid of a troublesome neighbor, the Talmud actually tells you how to find that moment. But I don't want to share that on the podcast. It's too dangerous. But for the duration of Bilam's campaign, God suspended this practice because otherwise, Bilam's curses would have landed with absolute catastrophic consequences. There would have been nothing left. That's what the Talmud tells us. Now, the sages in the Tosfos commentary, they try to understand what this means. If God has a moment, an instant of divine wrath, how is that enough time to give a curse? You imagine that if you were to give a curse, you'd have to say a lot of different things. If you have an instant, a millisecond, even a second, it's just not enough time. So what was Bilam's plan? And the Tosfos gives two answers. First answer is that it's true that the moment of divine wrath lasts for only a second, but so long as you begin the curse in that second, even if you continue the curse subsequently, it still is able to channel that moment of divine wrath. So Bilam's curse may have been very long, but as long as it starts at that moment, it can have the deadly impact. That's the first answer that Tosfos gives. We're going to focus on the second answer. The second answer is that Bilam's curse was only one word. A word with only 3 letters. A word that's so small, you could actually say it in a second. It takes an instant. It takes the same length as the moment of divine wrath. And the word is kaleim, which means destroy them. Kaleim, destroy them. Kaf, lamed, mem, destroy them. Continues the Tosafos and says that God did not allow Bilam to curse the nation with this one word curse, kaleim, and instead flipped it on its head, turned it upside down. The word kaleim, kaf, lamed, mem, if you do it in the opposite way, mem, lamed, kaf, you spell out a different word. Kaleim, kaf, lamed, mem, melech, that's the opposite, mem, lamed, kaf. Now, if you don't know the Hebrew letters, this may sound like a foreign language, which it is. But if you spell the word backwards, the word kaleim, which means destroy them, 3 letters, kaf, lamed, mem. If you spell it backwards, it's mem, lamed, kaf, and that spelled the word melech, which means a king. And that's why part of Bilam's blessing, chapter 23, verse 21 of Bamidbar, he calls the nation utruas melech bo. The love, the adoration of the king is in Israel. This is the part of the blessing of Bilam. He did not find any sin amongst Jacob, did not find any iniquity amongst Israel. Hashem, their God, is with them, and the love of the king, of the melech, is within them. Okay, so what do we have? We have a brief moment of divine wrath. Bilam would use that to say a one-word curse, kaleim, destroy them, kaf, lamed, mem. And God flipped it on its head. Instead of kaf, lamed, mem, it's mem, lamed, kaf. From destroy them, kaleim, to melech, to king, God transformed, flipped it on its head. And in fact, if you look at the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, chapter 23, verse 6, at the end of the Torah, Moshe is rediscussing some of the events of the preceding 40 years, and he talks about the blessing and the attempted curse of Bilaam, and he uses the same terminology. God flipped it from a curse to a blessing. And again, now we have some more insight. From kaleim, kaf lamed mem, to mem lamed kaf, to melech. From destroy them to king. It's the same letters, it's just in the opposite orientation, and this change in orientation changes everything. Okay, this is the background of our discussion. There would have been a deadly curse, a curse that's so powerful and devastating, it would have destroyed everything. And this curse, you need only one word for it, kaleim. But God did not allow Bilaam to do that, flipped it on its head, transformed it into a blessing, and the blessing is the same letters, just in the opposite orientation, mem, lamed, kaf, for melech, for king. Okay, here's where we're going to go into the idea. Our sages tell us something profound. What exactly is this curse? This one-word curse, kaleim, destroy them, that Bilaam would levy upon Israel. How is this such a destructive curse? A curse that destroys everything. Nothing's left over. And what exactly is the opposite of this curse? The blessing. Just switching the letters from kaf lamed mem to mem lamed kaf. Here's the idea. We operate on many different levels. And our sages tell us that we have three different categories of operation within ourselves. We have our intellect, and that's in our brain. We have our emotions, and that's situated in our heart. And we have our impulse, and that is situated in our innards, in our liver. And in fact, we may have spoken about this in the past. We know that the human soul is comprised of 5 parts, but only 3 parts are within a person's body. The other 2 are above them. Within a person's body is the nefesh, the ruach, and the neshama. That's in ascending order. And our sages tell us that the nefesh is situated in the liver, the ruach is situated in the heart, and the neshama is situated in the brain. Different modes of operation. Intellect in the brain, emotion in the heart, impulse in the liver. Now, the Hebrew words for those 3 organs are mem lamed kaf, or kaf lamed mem. The intellect is in the brain. The brain is called the moach in Hebrew. The emotion, it's in the heart. The Hebrew word for heart is lev. That's the heart. The impulse is in the liver, and the Hebrew word for that is kaved, which means also heavy, but it means liver. What's the blessing? What's the curse? Bilam's curse is kaleim, kaf, lam, and mem, which means destroy them, but on a deeper level, it means let them operate in this progression. Let them start with their impulse in the liver, and then progress to the emotion of the heart, and then progress to the moach, to the intellect of the brain. That's the devastating curse of Bilam. And the flip of that, the opposite of that, is the melech, the mem lamed kaf. It's the brain begins the journey, and the heart continues it, and it's consummated in the liver, in the impulse. We have 3 letters, kaf, lam, and mem, and they correspond to 3 different auspices within ourselves. The liver, the seat of the impulse, the heart, the seat of the emotion, and the brain, the seat of the intellect. And the deeper message behind Bilaam's curse was that the interplay between these three forces, it should begin with the kaf, with the liver, with the impulse. They should be motivated. They should get their beginning with the instinct, with the impulse, with inclinations, with the base desires. And that should migrate. That should awaken and arouse the emotion of the heart. Their emotions should be the byproduct of their impulse. And the byproduct of that should be the brain. The brain should be used in service of the impulses. Let the brain justify and rationalize the desires, the base desires, the impulses, the base impulses of their liver. That's the curse. That's the way to destroy the nation. Let the initiation of their perspective be the base desires, the base impulses, and let that animate and awaken and arouse the emotions of the heart. And then the brain comes at the end to just justify and rationalize what the impulses want and what the emotions are marshaled to advance. The brain is a very powerful force, but it can be used to rationalize the most immoral, the most bankrupt, the most degenerate of perspectives. You could have very intelligent people, very high IQs, who could use their brains to justify the most heinous, the most corrupt, the most immoral of perspectives. It's not enough to have intellect. Intellect, when used to justify and rationalize the lowest and basest of desires, that's a path of devastation. And that's what Bilaam wanted to curse the nation with. Kaleim, kaf, lam, and mem. Liver, heart, brain. They have powerful brains. Let that brain be used to justify the base impulses. The reverse of this is a melech, a king. It's the same three letters, but the orientation is reversed. Mem, and then the lamed, and then the kaf. The definition of a king is someone who begins with the intellect. And the intellect arouses the heart. And the intellect, together with the heart, they motivate, they spur, they direct the impulses. Now we have some examples, some very powerful examples of these two different processes. One we just read about. A man with tremendous potential. His name was Korach, a great-grandson of Levi, first cousins of Moshe and Aaron. He was not a simpleton. He was not a lightweight. He had a very well-reasoned, well-argued perspective. And his argument was very compelling. He managed to persuade 250 leaders of the nation, and he seduced a large contingent of the nation to follow his cause. He was even a prophet of sorts. Our sources tell us that he was a clever and wise person, but he acted very foolishly because he misunderstood his prophecy. He foresaw a descendant of his named Samuel, who is equal to Moshe and Aaron on some level. And he thought that that vision justified his rebellion against Moshe and Aaron. But if you study the story of Korach, you find something very interesting. Korach's brain was the sharpest of them all, perhaps. But the brain was not being used in pursuit of truth. Rather, it was used to justify a base impulse. It was a byproduct of a base desire. What does Korach say? What's his perspective? He tells Moshe and Aaron, the entire congregation is holy. God is amongst the whole nation. So why do you, Moshe and Aaron, ascend over the people? Now, our sages tell us that he had a very sophisticated thesis on leadership. And you read all the different parts of the Korach story, it's hard to put them together. The Midrash tells us, cited by Rashi, that one of the things that he did, he had all of his followers dress in garments made entirely of the blue tchelis wool. And he marched them to Moshe and he asked them the question, does such a garment require tzitzis? So Moshe said, of course, every four-cornered garment requires tzitzis. So Korach began to mock Moshe. How can it be if you have only one blue string? That's enough to discharge your entire responsibility of the entire garment. And now I have the whole garment, thousands of strings, all made of this blue wool. How is it possible that you haven't fulfilled your responsibilities? Okay. A second question. Suppose, Korach tells Moshe, suppose you have a house that's entirely filled from top to bottom with Torah scrolls. Does such a house need a mezuzah? Does such a house need a small scroll with only 2 paragraphs on the doorpost? So Moshe responds, of course. Doesn't matter what the contents of the house are. You need to have a mezuzah. Again, Korach's mocking Moshe. It doesn't make any sense. If you have a tiny scroll with only 2 paragraphs of the Torah, and that's enough to put on your doorpost to discharge your responsibility, the whole house is full of Torah scrolls. Shouldn't you certainly fulfill your responsibility? Korach is developing a very sophisticated and profound theorem. The Torah is there to give us lessons, to inspire us, to uplift us, to edify us. But how much can you ask of people? How much can you expect of people? What's the minimum inspiration, uplifting that we need? As an example, a blue string. It's very uplifting. It reminds us of God. It reminds us of our soul. It connects us to the spiritual. The blue reminds us of the sea, which reminds us of the heaven, which reminds us of the crown of glory. The blue string is very powerful. So ideally, you should have a garment that's entirely made of blue wool. Isn't that ideal? Wouldn't that be the best? Wouldn't it be preferable to have just blue everywhere to really hammer home the lesson? That would be ideal, of course. It's just not practical. It's too expensive. It's unreasonable to expect this of the masses. So even though that's ideal, but the Torah has a minimum requirement. At a minimum, you have 1 string of blue. So here's Korach's thesis. You only need the minimum, the 1 string of blue, when you don't have the ideal, when you don't have the garment that's entirely blue. Only when you don't have the ideal situation, blue everywhere, only then does the Torah say, okay, at a minimum have 1 blue string. But what if you do have the ideal? Everything's blue. In that case, you wouldn't need the minimum. Similarly, you have a house full of Torah scrolls. Torah scrolls are so elevating and edifying and transformative. So ideally, that's the only thing you should have in your house. Nothing but Torah scrolls. That would be the best case scenario. But alas, it's just not practical. It's too expensive. It's too much to ask of people. So the Torah has a minimum. If you cannot have the ideal, at a minimum, put one small scroll with 2 paragraphs on your doorpost. Korach comes with the same theorem, the same thesis, the same argument. The Torah only asks you to put one scroll with 2 paragraphs on your doorpost because that's the minimum. But what if you have the ideal? What if the house is full of Torah scrolls? Well, in that case, you don't need the minimum. That was his argument. That was his theorem. That was his thesis. Now, why is this relevant? This is how Korach chose to unseat Moshe. Ideally, the entire nation should be holy. Ideally, the entire nation should be leaders. Ideally, the entire nation should be teams. But that's just not practical. It's too much to ask. So at a minimum, you have one leader, you have one team, you have one prophet. But what if you happen to have the ideal, where everyone's a prophet, where everyone is holy, where everyone is a king, where everyone is a leader, where the entire congregation is entirely holy, and God is amongst all of them? When you have the ideal, you don't need the minimum. The whole nation's holy. We don't need you, Moshe. We don't need you, Aaron. The whole house is full of Torah scrolls. The garment is entirely blue. It's a very clever, very sophisticated, very sharp argument. Korach's mind produced a masterpiece. His brain was operating at the highest level of sophistication. But what was his true motivator? It's a very clever, multi-leveled, multi-pronged thesis to contrast the ideal situation, a house full of Torah scrolls, a garment that's entirely blue, a nation that's all prophets, with the practical, with the minimum, best case scenario versus what you can expect of the masses. It's a beautiful theory. Where did this theory come from? Was this a theory that Korach developed in a vacuum? It was simply his mind trying to find the truth? Absolutely not. Korach's theory did not start with his mind. It started with his liver. It was based on rank envy. Korach's first cousin Moshe was the king. He tolerated that. Korach's other first cousin Aaron was the high priest. He tolerated that as well. But there was a third first cousin, Elitzaphan ben Uziel, who was made the Nasi, the prince of the family of Kahas. And this was a more junior cousin to Korach himself. So Korach believed that that job should have gone to him. And he was envious. Envy. He thought he was overlooked. He was passed over for a promotion. And this is where the whole Korach journey started. The envy, the base envy, aroused his emotion, and that's what triggered his mind to find some justification, to find some rationalization, to unseat Moshe and to unseat Aaron. And when the mind is given a task, when the brain, when the intellect is given a task, it will fulfill the task, even if that task is simply a rationalization, a justification for something base. His base rank envy. That's where it all started. And that aroused the emotion, the heart. And this whole very clever theory, this whole thesis, it was simply a way to justify his displeasure with what Moshe and Aaron did based upon his envy. He gave his brain a task, find some justification to work around the problem of Moshe and Aaron. He is a perfect fulfillment of the Bilaam curse. Kaleim, start with the kaf, start with the base impulses. Use that to arouse the emotion and get the brain working in high drive to justify it. Now, if you were a spectator to the debate, if you will, of Korach and his congregation, you would be very impressed with his dazzling brilliance. His argument actually makes a lot of sense. It's sound. It's airtight. It's logical. It makes sense to contrast the ideal setting with the minimum requirements. Ideally, we'd love to have everything blue, but at a minimum, you have to have one screen. Ideally, the house should be full of Torah scrolls. At a minimum, it's one mezuzah on the doorpost. Ideally, the whole nation should be prophets, but at a minimum, you have Moshe, you have Aaron. It's a very sophisticated perspective. It's persuasive, it's sharp, it's well-reasoned. And if you hear it, you don't know, is this the thesis of a king? Or is this a cancerous outgrowth of a curse of Bilaam? Is he simply rationalizing petty envy? And if you hear it, you don't know, because they sound the same. The mind is a powerful tool. It's a powerful superpower. It enables us to connect to higher things, to higher values, to higher ideals, to higher realities. It's part of what separates us from animals. It's a magnificent and glorious superpower. It's nuclear power. But just as nuclear power can be used to provide power to civilization, it can be misused for destructive purposes. If you put your brain on a mission to find the truth, just the truth, the truth, the truth, the truth, and that's it, it will find the truth. If you put your brain on a mission to find falsehood, it will come up with something persuasive to justify the falsehood. Is the brain royalty of a king? It could be. It can also be the deadly curse of Bilaam. Our nation was founded by Abraham. Abraham is the paragon of a king who employed his brain to find the truth. It wasn't to use his brain to justify his pre-existing biases. He wanted to find the truth. And he spent 40 years thinking nonstop, day and night, until he arrived at the complete truth. His brain led him to absolute faith and absolute truth in every aspect. How did he arrive at the truth? He had no teachers. He had no tradition. His father, his mother, his entire civilization, his entire society, they were all idolaters. He was seeking truth, and he discovered the truth. He discovered there's only one God, only one all-powerful, almighty, omnipotent, omniscient God who created everything. There's no other power. And he understood that everyone else around him is all wrong. They're all wrong, wrong, wrong. His brain found the truth. And he was aroused to emotion. And he began to publicize this truth. He debated with the heretics. He argued with the idolaters. He engaged in polemics with the pagans. He shattered the idols. He built legions of followers. He told everyone there's only one God Almighty. Only him you should bow down before. And then he was given a choice. Either you reject your newfound monotheism, or you will be thrown into a fiery furnace. And Abraham didn't flinch. Throw me into the furnace. Well, wait. What about the impulse of self-preservation? What about the most basic human need to preserve your life, to avoid danger? Abraham is telling us, he's showing us, his impulses, his base impulses, are now governed by his mind, by his faith. This is the greatest example of someone working, as it were, top down. The brain to the emotion, to the heart, to the impulse. His brain arrived at the truth. That aroused his emotions. That awakened his emotions. That was translated into his impulses, his inclinations, his base way of interfacing with the world. All that was governed by his brain, not the other way around. Even his base impulse is saying, I'll die for God, sure. Abraham is like a king. The logic starts the journey. And the logic is relentless, turning over every stone, examining every angle, searching for the truth. And once that is discovered and developed and rock solid, it can migrate to the heart. It can be translated in emotion. And even the base impulse is transformed. It's a very powerful insight. If someone wants to fix their character, how do you fix character? You have an impulse. It's a bad impulse. It's a bad habit. How do you fix it? Here's a way to fix it. Here's an example. You can transform your habits, your impulses, your inclinations, your base reactions with your mind. When we are studying ethics, what are we trying to do? We're trying to understand it so well, it can actually begin to filter down to our heart and eventually to our liver, to our impulses. If you, for example, understand how corrupt, how wrong, how illogical it is to have arrogance, to have hubris, to have feelings of superiority. If you understand that there's only one creator, and only creator can possibly have a feeling of supremacy. If you understand this principle so well in your mind, you can follow the trajectory of a king. The brain to the heart to the impulses. You'll actually change the way you feel about something. By the way, all character can be fixed using this method. You understand it so well, why it's appropriate to never get angry. Never. And to always be humble. And to always be kindly and generous. And to always be patient. And to always be understanding. And to judge others favorably. And to care about others. Every characteristic can be acquired via this process. Truly clear, cogent, logical understanding will eventually migrate its way downwards and transform the impulses, the brain to the heart, to deliver the way of Abraham, the way of a king. But kings are rare. The default is the curse of Bilaam. The default is that we start with our impulses. We have instinct. We have desires, base desires. And we deploy our superpower, our mind, to rationalize, to justify the pre-existing impulse. If you think about our faith, we spent a lot of time learning about our faith and learning about the Torah and learning about the principles of our religion. And we discover it's so unimpeachably logical. As an example, you think about how preposterous is it to reject the Creator? You think about just the human body. 37 trillion cells. Each cell has billions and billions and billions of parts, of factories that work together. And so infinitesimally small, it's obviously was created, it was designed. It's so obvious. It's so logical. Within you, there's trillions of tremendously powerful, intricate machines. You have the most talented technologists, the most advanced machinery, most advanced fabs that create these transistors, 2 nanometers. It's massive compared to our cell. Again, every cell is tiny, so infinitesimally small. And within every cell, there's billions of little machines. There's no way to compare, to match the most advanced technology to the sophistication and precision of just ourselves, our body. The human mind is so powerful, uses so little energy. Now there's a lot of talk about AI. AI, machine learning, neural networks. Amazing. The amount of energy it takes. It's like there's more, you need more energy than we've ever used before for anything. The human mind uses like a tiny amount of energy. It's unbelievably efficient. Billions and billions of connections and synapses that work so perfectly, so much more advanced than anything that we can create. How is it possible to reject the plainly obvious reality that we are created, we are designed? It's so absurd and preposterous. Here's the answer. A healthy mind, pursuing truth, will come to the conclusion that we are created. There's a designer, there's a creator who created us and everything around us. The logic is completely unimpeachable, completely incontrovertible. Our world is so perfect, so well designed, so balanced. The sun is 93 million miles away, a little bit closer, a little bit further away, we couldn't exist. We're in the Goldilocks zone, the water cycle, the ozone layer. Always ask the question, people want to terraform Mars. The only reason why they want to do that is to justify the idea that it could happen really anywhere. What's the life expectancy of a human on any other planet? Saturn. How long would you last on Saturn for? Jupiter. You wouldn't last a minute anywhere else. What's the life expectancy here? 80 years? What's the annual rainfall on Mars? How much does it rain there every year? 0.0 inches. We live in a perfect world. It's a perfect system. It's clearly designed. You have to be an imbecile to not realize that. Yet we have people with very sophisticated brains, very talented brains, very capable brains who argue against that. How is it possible? It's mystifying to us believers. Here's the answer. They are smitten by the curse of Bilaam. Yes, their mind is powerful. Yes. It's very powerful. You know who else, by the way, had powerful minds? The Nazis. That they tested their IQ in Nuremberg. Genius level IQ. Genius. Yeah. The brain is a very, very powerful thing, and it can be used to very destructive aims. A mind not being deployed to seek truth will seek justification and rationalization of the pre-existing base impulse. If your base impulse is, I don't want the idea of God, I find it irritating, frightening, that there's this all-powerful entity, your brain is put on a mission, on a task, like Korach's brain, like the Nazis' brain. Every heretic, the brain is being used in the method envisioned by the curse of Bilaam to justify falsehood. The brain that can help you find truth will help you find its opposite. I think of just an example, a social example. It's not good for man to be alone. You have to have a spouse. You have to have a partner. How are you going to find a spouse? There's the way of the king, and there's the way of the curse. People today, they go to their phones, swipe right, swipe left, swipe right, swipe left. What's determining the suitability of all these potential matches? It's the liver at play. It's the base impulse at play. Just that. Just that. And that's how you begin the journey. What do you know? Shocking. Doesn't really work so well. The correct way to do it is the way of the king. Logic. Use your brains. What makes sense? Is there compatibility? Is this a suitable match? Try to use logic. If the logic initiates a process and that arouses the emotion, and only then does it get manifested with the base impulse, that's an enduring approach. That's the path of the king. The other way around, you start with the impulse, find some way to justify it. Your brain can do that. Your brain's very clever. It's very slick. It's dexterous. Give it a mission, it will do it. The mind can be used to justify the most awful, heinous, savage, destructive things in the world. It can certainly be used to justify a destructive relationship. This was Bilaam's plan. This was his one-word curse. And it's so powerful. Kaleim, start with the impulse, and only then find the justification. It would unravel everything. There'd be nothing left of what Abraham began. Abraham began this nation as a king. Follow the mind to the truth. In the curse of Bilaam, it would be the opposite. Bilaam himself gives an example of that. At the end of his botched attempt at cursing the nation, he gives Balak a recommendation. He tells him that the God of the Israelites hates promiscuity. Get them to sin, you'll own them. So what happened? The Moabite women seduced the Israelite men, and the Israelite men start doing idolatry. What's idolatry? Our rejection and repudiation of God. How do Israelites reject God? How could you, using your mind, reject Almighty God? It's only because you're smitten by this Moabite paramour, and the only way to engage in the promiscuity that your base impulses, your base desires want, if the only way to justify that is idolatry, your brain will find a way. It's a slippery thing. It's a dexterous thing. Forced at gunpoint to justify idolatry, it can do that. And it can even sound persuasive, like Korach did. The Talmud makes a very shocking statement. The Israelites, the Jews, were never persuaded by the logic of idolatry. The only reason why they did idolatry was to permit licentiousness and promiscuity. They never were persuaded by the truth of idolatry in a vacuum. It was always a way to justify their degenerate behavior. Your brain is a superpower. Can be used for good, can be misused to even justify idolatry. The question is, where is it in the pecking order? Where is it on the chain? Is it being directed to find truth? Or is it being directed to find something else? A defense attorney can use his brain or her brain to find acquittal for a murderer. That's how powerful the brain is. It can send a cold-blooded killer back to the streets. It's a powerful thing. And just as it can be used to achieve unimaginable heights, that very same brain, as demonstrated by Korach, as demonstrated by people every day, as demonstrated by atheists and evolutionists and heretics of all types, non-believers of all types, the brain can be used to lead people down a path of devastation and destruction. That's the choice. There's the way of the king, or the deadliest curse of them all. We should choose the way of the king. We should choose wisely. I started off by saying this is going to be very important, to be a bit distressing, because no one likes the idea that their brain cannot always be trusted. It's important. It's powerful. It can change your life. You can fix all your bad character. You can truly elevate yourself. You have to be a king to do that, though. And you cannot fall prey to the devastating, deadly cataclysmic curse of Bilaam. I look forward to your comments, your questions, and your feedback. And as always, you can send me an email, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, your comments, and feedback. And in fact, I cherish your questions, your comments, and your feedback. rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.